The UFC has a main event this weekend that features an all-time great welterweight in Kamaru Usman, and so that inspired me to make this video where I'm going to run through my top 10 welterweights of all time while also splitting these guys up into different tiers. Let me know your thoughts down below. Who should be higher? Who should be lower? Who got snubbed from my top 10? If you enjoy, hit the like button and subscribe. But we are going to start off here in tier 5 with my number 10 welterweight of all time. This might be controversial. I actually ended up going with Belal Muhammad. Now, I would consider him like a lower level champion, pretty much like in any weight class, but you look at his resume and it's still very solid. He has a 15-4 UFC record. He went on an 11 fight unbeaten streak. Now, on that streak, he does have wins over solid names. Some of them are definitely kind of older, out of their prime. You're looking at like Wonder Boy, Gilbert Burns, Damian Maia, but like the Wonder Boy he fought was still picking up solid wins, within the top 10. Gilbert Burns, maybe not at his peak, but like still not like the form of Gilbert Burns we have right now. Damian Maia, I'm definitely more willing to throw that one away as kind of like a very old Damian Maia. But like those are some of the questionable wins. But he still has like a win against Vicente Luque, and that halted his 4-fight finish streak. Like Vicente Luque was on a roll, and people thought that Luque was going to run through Belal like he did early on in his UFC career. That knockout win against Sean Brady is going to age insanely well. And then I know Leon Edwards, like people are pretty out on him at this point, had a terrible performance against Sean Brady. But I'm more willing to give the guy the credit who kind of like took that fighter out of their prime. Like people thought Leon was going to be an all-time great welterweight, still might be an all-time great welterweight, but like 3 title wins, beat Kamaru Usman twice. And so if Belal was really like the first guy to get to him in a very, very long time, I'm still going to give him credit for that being like a pretty high quality win. So he was a champion, didn't defend the belt, but still has some pretty decent names on his resume. Now, honestly, I don't think Belal is going to pick up a ton of extra high quality wins throughout the rest of his career. I feel like he's probably on the down end. You have a lot of like really high level younger welterweights on the rise. So I'm going to have him slotted in here at number 10. Continuing on with tier 5, at number 9, I have Colby Covington, a 12-5 UFC record, very, very solid. It's actually 10-1 in his first 11 UFC fights. He was an interim champion in a win against Rafael dos Anjos. Now, I do think this fight was a lot more competitive than people remember. Like, I feel like some people think this was like a dominant Colby performance. I think partly because like Joe Rogan, I believe, has talked about it like that in at least some of Colby's fights. It was very competitive. It was actually somewhat close, but still a very, very solid win. I do think Colby was kind of done dirty to not get the opportunity to fight Tyron Woodley. And so Usman ends up sliding in and like gets that opportunity to take down Tyron Woodley, where you look at how that fight played out and you think Colby probably would have had a decent shot in that matchup. His resume doesn't really stand the test of time. Like he has wins versus like an older Damian Maia, an older Robbie Lawler, and then like some of his bigger wins, kind of like post-title shots like Tyron Woodley, Jorge Masvidal. Woodley was already on his slide. Jorge Masvidal, not in his prime. Kind of crazy to say, but it seems like his best performances like are in losses to Kamaru Usman. And he was really the guy that made Usman look, somewhat human in those matchups. I personally, I'm not a big Colby fan, admittedly. I thought that second fight against Kamaru Usman should have been a draw. I think you can give Usman a 10-8, I think in round 1. I think Usman might have won the second, but there were 3 rounds that I think Colby had a legit shot of winning. So just very, very competitive matchups. I don't think he's going to add to his legacy. He's probably cooked at this point. And I do think you can make the case Belal's ahead of him. I mean, Belal actually had, the undisputed strap. He has that win against Sean Brady. I do just think overall, I think Colby Covington is the slightly better fighter, kind of similar styles, but they're in the same tier for a reason. And then the last guy I have in this tier is going to be Carlos Condit. Now, when you look at Condit's UFC record, it is pretty deceiving. 9-10. You would think he was like some sort of journeyman, not a super high-level fighter, not someone who should be cracking my top 10 all-time welterweights. But I do think, before his fall-off, the dude was super impressive. First off, he was the WEC welterweight champion, went 5-0 with 4 title wins. Admittedly, pretty low level of competition, but I will just throw that out there. But then he started 5-1 in the UFC with KOs against Roy McDonald, Dan Hardy, had an interim title win against Nick Diaz. And then when we look at his run from 2012 to 2016, he beat Nick Diaz for the interim title. Then he lost in his chance to unify the belt against George St-Pierre. Then he had a loss to Johny Hendricks. Then he KO'd Martin Kampmann, who was his first UFC loss, split decision, and I think in his UFC debut. Then he lost to Tyron Woodley. Then he knocked out Thiago Alves. And then he got another shot at the belt against Robbie Lawler and lost a very, very close split decision that could have gone either way. So he did get to the interim belt, was very close to actually getting that undisputed title, and does have some solid wins mixed in there. So I do have him in this tier 5 with Belal and Colby Covington. Now moving into tier 4, at number 7, I have Johny Hendricks. He has a 13-8 UFC record, but did start off 8-2, and that was really in his run at welterweight. He has one title win, but from 2008 to 2015, this is the combination of his UFC and WEC fights, he went 14-3, with 2 of those losses being split decisions in title fights against George St-Pierre and Robbie Lawler. In terms of his skill set, very impressive wrestling, hit like an absolute tank. He did, though, have a very, very steep fall off, and you can say it like aligned with the introduction of USADA. I think he's come out and said that like IVs were the issue, that once he wasn't able to rehydrate with IVs, that's where things went wrong. You can also say like once he got to the belt, maybe the motivation wasn't quite there. He wasn't as strict. Ended up missing weight in his last 2 welterweight fights, also missed weight after he was forced to move up at middleweight, even though he was super undersized there. So he ended his career on a 1-5 run, but he got to the title, arguably could have had another title win against Robbie Lawler, and arguably could have been the guy to dethrone GSP on his crazy long run in a fight that pretty much everyone scored for Johny Hendricks. So I'm someone who is kind of willing to ding guys for like steroid stuff, and it's not great that he kind of fell off right at the introduction of USADA, but don't believe he ever tested positive for anything. And if a few decisions go another way, I think people could remember Johny Hendricks a lot differently. Then at number 6, I'm going to go with Robbie Lawler. He has 15 wins at 170, which is tied for 5th most all-time in the weight class. He has 3 title wins. I will say 2 of the 3 were very, very close split decisions, like I talked about with Johny Hendricks and Carlos Condit, but got his hand raised. Still like very close competitive fights. There's clearly arguments that he could have won both of those fights, and he did. Looking at some of his best wins, Johny Hendricks, Carlos Condit, beat Roy McDonald twice. Obviously had that legendary title fight where he finished him in the 5th round. And then also just got to give a shout out to his overall longevity here. Robbie Lawler made his UFC debut in 2002. He became champion from 2014 to 2016. So he did bounce around other promotions, after his UFC debut. But like to fight in the promotion in 2002 and then be able to win the belt and hold the belt like 12 to 14 years later, that is insane. And then also to retire in 2023 and go out with a knockout win. Like he's been fighting at a very high level for a very, very long time. Got to the top of the mountain, won the title, 3 title wins. Shout out to Robbie Lawler. And then moving into tier 3, at number 5, I have Leon Edwards. And I think at this point, people are going to be pretty soured on him. Obviously not great back-to-back fights. He might honestly be on like the Tyron Woodley-esque decline, but still looking at his overall resume, 14-4 UFC record, 3 title wins, has 2 wins against Kamaru Usman, a win against Colby Covington, a win against RDA, a win against Nate Diaz. And I know people are going to nitpick the Usman wins. You say the first one, obviously, people are going to say, oh, it was a lucky kick. He was getting dominated, whatever. And then the second fight, people are going to say, oh, Usman was out of his prime. Like I talked about with Belal, I'm willing to, prop up someone's win if they were the person to take Usman out of their prime, right? So Leon knocks him out. Say whatever you want. He knocks out Kamaru Usman. And then if you're going to say Kamaru was out of his prime in the second fight, or technically the third between the two, that was because of Leon Edwards and that shot that he landed that put Kamaru Usman out cold. So I'm going to give Leon a lot of respect for those 2 wins. Now, if you want to nitpick the Colby win, I will be right on board with that. Colby didn't deserve the title shot. He looked terrible. He looked terrible in his next fight against Joaquin Buckley. Maybe not the highest quality title win. I mean, it's definitely not the highest quality title win, but still a decent resume here. I mean, he had a 13-fight unbeaten streak, and he might go on a rough stretch here, right? The Belal fight, not a super inspiring performance, was completely dominated by Sean Brady. There's a lot of young, studs, up-and-coming dudes in this weight class. But you can't take away the 3 title wins. You can't take away the fact that he was the dude who took the belt off of Usman and then defended it against him. So Leon Edwards will be here at number 5. Then at number 4, I have the guy who I just mentioned, Tyron Woodley, a 9-6-1 UFC record, but started off in the promotion at 9-2-1 before that, 4-fight losing streak. He has 4 title wins and a draw and a title defense. He is 4th all-time in terms of title wins. Has a lot of high-quality wins, Robbie Lawler, Wonderboy, Carlos Condit, Damian Maia, Darren Till. He was also finishing and hurting these dudes in these big fights. He has finishes in 6 of his 9 wins, landed knockdowns in 8 of the 9, and then obviously did have his fall off where he lost 4 straight. Very, very, very uncompetitive fights, but I'm much more willing to lean into the prime of someone. And before the fall off, Tyron Woodley was an absolute killer, so that's why he is in here at number 4. Then at number 3, I think you could make the case that Matt Hughes should be in a higher tier. Can't really get around him being ranked any higher than number 3, but he was the original guy to beat. He was the original welterweight GOAT. Overall, had an 18-7 UFC record, 9 title wins, which is second most all-time in the weight class. Has some solid wins, GSP, BJ Penn, Sean Shirk. But the title defense number, a little bit sketchy because you look at some of the early defenses. 2 wins against Carlos Newton, a win against Hayato Sakurai, Gil Castillo. Those 3 guys combined for a 4-7 record in the UFC, and those count as 4 title defenses for Matt Hughes. So the title defense number, a little bit wonky, but he still was the dude, still, was the first guy to beat GSP, has the win against BJ Penn. Gotta respect him for being the clear top dog, early on with the welterweight weight class. And then moving into tier 2 here, in a tier by himself, at number 2, I do have Kamaru Usman, 15-3 UFC record. That would be, 15-2 at welterweight, 6 UFC title wins, started 15-0 in the UFC. He has the longest welterweight win streak of all time, has some solid wins, Tyron Woodley, 2 wins against Colby Covington, 2 wins against Jorge Masvidal, a win against Gilbert Burns, RDA. I also just think it's tougher to hold the title for, long periods of time today than it was back in a time where GSP was champion and you're seeing Anderson Silva, John Jones, Demetrius Johnson, just have these insanely long reigns. It's tougher. The quality of competition is there. You also have to just fight more fights and use more of your career kind of building to that title shot, where some dudes were just able to walk in, pick up a couple of wins, and all of a sudden you're fighting for the title. I think, maybe you could nitpick the resume a little bit. The fact that you have 6 title wins and 4 of them are against 2 dudes isn't ideal, but Colby Covington, those are solid wins. The Tyron Woodley one, like I said, I know he went on that rough stretch, but Kamaru Usman was the guy to take him out of his prime. If something happened with Woodley and someone broke Woodley, that guy would have been Kamaru Usman. So shout out to him. He is my second best welterweight of all time. And I know I'm recording this before the Joaquin Buckley fight. I would be shocked if Kamaru Usman's ranking changed. I don't really care if he goes on and loses his next 10 fights. I feel like he's already locked in here at number 2. And I just really, really struggle to see him catching GSP. He would have to win this fight against Buckley, then win another title fight, and then defend it maybe a couple more times. I just think we're probably past that. I'm picking Joaquin Buckley to win this weekend. So Kamaru Usman at number 2, I imagine he'll stay here moving forward. And then at number 1, no shocker here, it is George St-Pierre, a 20-2 UFC record, 19-2 at welterweight, 12 title wins. And I think people kind of want to nitpick GSP's resume, and I think a lot of it is just because when you're looking at the earlier days of the UFC, there aren't as many established champions where you can say, oh, I beat that dude, so that's a huge win. When people nitpick Mighty Mouse's resume, it's not his fault that he was just the champion for forever, so he didn't have the opportunity to beat a former champion or an interim champion. And I think some of that is here with GSP, where after you get past the Matt Hughes wins and the BJ Penn wins, he was just the champ for so long that no one else had the resume of, oh, they were a former champion, they were this, because GSP was just so dominant. So he has 2 wins against Matt Hughes, who, like I said, was the original welterweight GOAT, 2 wins against BJ Penn, a win against Nick Diaz, a win against Carlos Condit, who was an interim champion when GSP was hurt, wins against Jake Shields, John Fitch. GSP went on a stretch from 2007 to 2011 where he won 33 straight rounds. That is absolutely insane, I mean, for anyone. And he was doing that in title fights. He was just blanking dudes for 4 years straight. So shout out to GSP. I think he is the clear-cut welterweight GOAT. He's also my GOAT overall. I don't think you can be the GOAT if you've tested positive for steroids. I just think the margins are so small, and I'm willing to give, the guy who did it clean, the guy who never popped, I'm willing to give them that bump. So GSP is my overall GOAT. He's also clearly the welterweight GOAT, and that is going to wrap it up for my top 10. Let me know your comments down below. Yell at me who's too high, who's too low. But thank you all for stopping by, and I'll see you in the next one.